Chapter 861, Stealing the Communicator. Cha Haicheng's words managed to focus everyone's eyes on him. "Mr. Che, what's your idea?" Xia Yunfan inquired eagerly. Rudolph also asked curiously, "Do you have a way to make sure that they won't realize that the communicator has been stolen within 40 minutes? Cha Haicheng hemmed and hawed. "I have a way, although it's a bit risky, but it's worth a try, as the saying goes, wealth and riches." Bayamo said, "Don't whet our appetite, quickly tell us what you plan to do." Cha Haicheng slowly said his idea. For this matter, another person's help was needed. It was no other than Cha Haicheng's wife, Kim Kimi. At the mention of Kim Kimi, a strange light appeared in the eyes of Rudolph's few people. That former member of the Scylla girl group could be said to be nothing but beautiful and flirtatious. When he was on Rockflow Island, Cha Haicheng had used her to exchange for a lot of living materials. It could even be said that Cha Haicheng could meet 10 old customers who had traded with her in the time it took him to go out for a pee. Kim Kimi, a woman whose IQ wasn't very high, had always lived the life of a rich wife after she married Cha Haicheng. Even in the end times, she had no personal opinions and had always followed Cha Haicheng's orders. What Cha Haicheng told her to do, except for letting her die, she would listen. As for the ship, Kim Kimi didn't miss anything with the people on the ship. Especially the crew members, who were all considered her benefactors. Cha Haicheng had no qualms about cuckolding himself. As a shrewd Scylla politician, he had no sense of propriety or shame to speak of. As long as he could maximize his own interests, he wouldn't bat an eyelid even if he had the entire ship's men cuckold him. "We can find a good opportunity." Lao Xia in the galley was a lecher, and it wasn't a day or two between him and my wife. "Wait until the next time he comes to deliver food, and I'll have Kim Kimi seduce him. When that time comes, the task of stalling will be hers. And you guys must hurry up and finish our plan." Hearing that Cha Haicheng was so dedicated, the crowd was very moved. Rudolph even said, "Mr. Che, since you're so generous to contribute your wife, then why don't you let me do the same?" Cha Haicheng sneered, "As long as you work hard, I can let her accompany you for a while." Rudolph was happy. "Don't worry, this was nothing but a minor issue for me." Xia Yunfan raised a question. "This method is indeed very good, but the problem was 40 minutes, isn't that a bit too long? Is that cook okay?" Cha Haicheng was confident about this, however. "Don't forget, my wife, she was a professional. When we were still in Scylla, she was known as the god of war." The crowd couldn't help but laugh. To be cuckolded and still be able to say it with such pride, there was no one else but Cha Haicheng who was afraid. Cha Haicheng wasn't the least bit amused, because that's how I knew her in the first place, so I'm well aware of it. The members of the so-called girl groups were nothing more than playthings for certain people with them. Cha Haicheng had married her to facilitate his career, and anyway, when she was old and gray, she would be dismissed by giving her a sum of money. Several people complete the division of tasks. Kim Kimi, Cha Haicheng's wife, is in charge of seducing Chef Xia Changming. Then Pickpocket Rudolph took the opportunity to steal his communication equipment. Then it was handed over to Eisenman to operate and contact Colombia's Columbus Ocean Fleet. The others were responsible for letting the wind out to avoid accidents. Once an unexpected situation arose, it was pretended that Chef Xia Changming had accidentally dropped the communicator to the ground and they would return it. Chef Xia Changming's attention was on Kim Kimi at that time, and he might not notice the matter. Only, if they failed this time, it might cause Chef Xia Changming to be wary, and it would be extremely difficult for them to repeat the trick next time. Therefore, they didn't have many chances, and might only have one. The climate on the sea suddenly started to get worse. Zhang Yi had been sailing for 2 to 3 months, and this was the first time they had encountered such bad weather. Stormy winds blew relentlessly on the sea, whistling like monsters. Wave after wave rolled over, the waves undulating like a mountain. The huge Goldent front was surprisingly like a small boat in the midst of these huge waves, as if it would be overturned at any moment. Many people on the ship were trembling with fear, and some had already begun to pray to God. In Zhu Lark's room, Tommy was bawling his eyes out, distracted by fear, unable to stop. On the other hand, Julark and Su Nuanchi was holding onto the legs of the bed to prevent themselves from being thrown out. At this moment, when they heard that annoying crying in their ears, their eyes no longer had their usual charity in them. Instead, they were glaring at the crying baby with some disgust. It was really annoying. Julark said darkly in her heart. I should have known that I shouldn't have brought you on board in the first place. There was one thing she had never dared to mention, and that was that there were several times when she even had the urge to throw him into the sea. Zhang Yi was slightly uncomfortable, although he wasn't seasick, but such violent swaying made his mind a little restless. Fortunately, the furniture and other things in the cabin was fixed, so there was no need to worry about hurting anyone. Kur, you stay here properly first, I'll go to the control room to take a look. Zhang Yi was a bit uneasy. For some reason, there was always a subtle premonition in his heart. In the depths of the sea, there must be something hidden, spying on the Gold-Ent front, spying on him in the dark. Zhang Yi could not forget the look in the eyes of the fin dragon as it left before it was seriously injured by him. Like a spiteful human. So on the way back, he checked the control room every day and ordered the crew to keep an eye on the sonar and radar. Any discovery of anything strange must be reported to him at the first opportunity. Zhang Yi made a space shuttling and instantly arrived in the control room. The situation here was slightly better. The crew had seen this kind of big wind and waves many times before, and there was not much fear on their faces, and they were even in the mood to gossip there. After all, given the tonnage and quality of the Gold-Ent front, a storm of this magnitude was completely able to carry it. As for Zhang Yi, the shock in his heart was indescribable as he looked at the vast and terrifying scene outside through the window glass. It won't capsize, right? Zhang Yi couldn't help but ask this. The ship suddenly quieted down, and all the crew members looked at him with incomparably odd eyes. Old Tian came over and said to Zhang Yi, Mr. Zhang Yi, you can't say that word on the ship, it's too unlucky. Which word? Old Tian said, Foen. Zhang Yi smiled, there is still this taboo. Old Tian said, don't worry about it, with us here in this world-class Gold-Ent front, it won't be afraid of this level of wind and waves. Zhang Yi nodded, this was the benefit of having an old sailor, knowing how to handle it when in danger. But all of a sudden, a long and distant sound suddenly came from Zhang Yi's ears. The sound was very odd, long and distant, ending as if it had come across endless years, yet it gave one goosebumps all over his body. Zhang Yi's brows immediately furrowed like a sharp sword as a murderous aura filled the air. That fellow is here. I knew it was in. At the same time, the sonar operator alerted Zhang Yi. Mr. Zhang, it's appeared, the sea monster has appeared. There are huge objects rapidly approaching towards us from the depths of the sea. Chapter 862 Attack of the Fin Dragon. The Fin Dragon had come. It had finally come. Zhang Yi had waited for it for more than half a month, knowing that this day would definitely come. An overlord in the middle of the sea would not tolerate being injured without fighting back. This was because the world of the ocean itself was a world of the weak and the strong, more brutal than the world of humans. Zhang Yi's eyes slowly opened, he had prepared for the arrival of this day. The Gold-Ent front shook violently. The surrounding seawater began to surge wildly, and the waves had surprisingly exceeded the ship's hull by more than 10 meters high. Looking around, there was actually a ring of waves surrounding the entire Gold-Ent front. Oh no, the ship is out of control. A crew member suddenly shouted. The Gold-Ent front was rocking violently, difficult to control, like a flat boat that was being toyed with by the waves. This was an experience they had never had since they set sail, and every heart was a little apprehensive. Zhang Yi, however, was not panicked at this time, and had already skillfully put on the captain-level combat suit that Deng's technology had specially created for him. This time, in order to go out to sea, the function of compressed oxygen was also added additionally, so even if he accidentally fell into the ocean, he would not be drowned. Only, that kind of situation should be avoided as much as possible. After all, the ocean was not Zhang Yi's home turf. It was that thing messing around down there. Don't panic, I'll deal with it, you guys hold the ship steady. Zhang Yi's power was added to the entire Golden Front, allowing it to begin to detach itself from the surface of the water, unaffected by the waves and storms. Soon the Golden Front was suspended in mid-air and stabilized. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, was flying in mid-air, looking down at everything below his feet. The scene in front of him was indeed extremely shocking if viewed from high above. The huge body of the fin dragon was over 100 meters long. It showed its long body in the dark and deep waters, with hundreds of sharp and rough black dorsal fins on its back slicing through the waves, swimming swiftly in the water. It was the one that created the huge eddies that affected the Golden Front's operation. This time, however, it did not take the initiative to launch an attack on the Golden Front. Perhaps it was the experience of the last time that had taught it a lesson, making it realize that it wasn't safe to directly attack the hull. Therefore, utilizing the power of the ocean to topple the ship was its best option. Zhang Yi looked down on it from above, and it also felt the amazing oppressive force as it raised its head to look at the sky. The huge eyes were ice blue in color, and its eyeballs were much larger than Zhang Yi. But looking at the tiny human in front of it, there was a strong scorn in its eyes in addition to deep hatred. The first time they fought, if it wasn't for the sea as a cover, it might have been cut into 2 pieces by Zhang Yi's sword in its severely injured state. This time, however, it was clearly returning from its injuries. It suddenly opened its mouth and let out a sharp roar before that huge tentacle suddenly shot out a purple-white beam of light towards Zhang Yi in the air. The ability of Time Echo allowed Zhang Yi to predict the trajectory of its attack in advance. So before it could strike, Zhang Yi directly dodged this attack with an early dodge in the air. My turn. He drew out his holy judgment with his right hand, and black void fire filled the body of the sword. Understanding the strength of this power, the fin dragon swiftly disappeared into the middle of the deep sea with a swing of its tail, escaping as fast as a thief. However, it didn't run away, but only used the seawater to hide its body, not allowing Zhang Yi to attack it. A few moments later, huge waves erupted underneath the Golden Front. Raging seawater surged towards the Golden Front. This one wave was very terrifying, smashing down had to be thousands of tons of seawater, definitely able to cause great damage to the Golden Front. Zhang Yi's eyes glazed over as he instantly arrived on the Golden Front. 2 Realms Junction. A spherical defense was instantly wrapped around the entire Golden Front with the distortion of the 2-dimensional gates. The huge waves all entered within Zhang Yi's other dimension. What a cunning fellow, knowing that he couldn't help me, so he chose to strike at the people on board. Zhang Yi realized that this fin dragon possessed a very high level of intelligence. It knew how to utilize its advantages to fight Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi laughed coldly, but was not the least bit surprised. As much as the seawater was absorbed in, it was soon discharged from the middle of the foreign space as it was. He gave a counterattack order to Old Tian. Old Tian, release the depth charges. When he came, he had prepared a lot of weaponry. Especially for the situation that might arise at this time, he certainly would not be negligent. After Old Tian received Zhang Yi's order, he immediately loudly arranged the crew under him, get on the deck. Drop the depth charges. The crew showed a superb fighting quality, they had already prepared themselves, and when Old Tian gave the order, they immediately rushed to the deck. The Golden Front did not have a launching port, so it was using drop depth charges. This weapon was originally researched to deal with submarines hidden under the sea. But it was equally good against this giant sea monster. It was still the same thing. Thermal weapons were not useless in a world infested with inhumans and inhuman beasts, as long as the yield was large enough. One after another deep water bomb was dropped into the middle of the deep sea. Zhang Yi attracted the attention of the fin dragon in midair. That was why the fin dragon did not notice the bombs that were the size of a pea grain compared to its size. However, after dozens of deep water bombs were dropped at the depth where the fin dragon was, a violent explosion was immediately created. Boom! Boom! Rumble! Dull and violent explosions resounded in the depths of the ocean, and violent shockwaves wreaked havoc around the fin dragon's long body. Its body was too huge, so it was simply unable to dodge the impact of the explosions. It soon caused scar after scar to appear on its body that was comparable to steel. The fin dragon itself probably didn't expect that this civilian ship, which didn't seem to have any weaponry, had exerted the might of a warship. Squeak! It let out a shrill cry in pain. A white-purple beam of light shot up from the middle of the sea, directly coming to a height of thousands of meters. Then, like a great sword, it swiftly chopped down towards the golden front. Zhang Yi hovered in front of the golden front, his right hand opened, and an invisible fluctuation appeared in the gate of dimensions, absorbing the power of the atomic spit completely. Through this attack, Zhang Yi was able to feel what level the fin dragon's power was roughly at. Converted into the Inhuman's Alien Energy Index, it was roughly around 9,200 points. Just at this level, it could not threaten Zhang Yi. However, because of the terrain advantage of occupying the sea, it could even tangle with Zhang Yi, who had 9,600 points of Alien Energy Index. Zhang Yi couldn't kill it. But it couldn't kill Zhang Yi either, so it could only launch an attack on the golden front as a way to complete its revenge. Seawater can attenuate the impact, whether it was divine might or void attack, it would be weakened too much by millions of tons of seawater. If you want to kill it, it's still hard to do so with ordinary means. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. The sea was not his main battlefield, which was quite helpless. Chapter 863 40 minutes. The wave of attacks from the fin dragon did not cause any trouble for the golden front. Instead, it was itself attacked by a depth charge and suffered considerable injuries. Coupled with the fact that its own ability, Atomic Spit, had been completely restrained by Zhang Yi, it realized that fighting any longer would not be fruitful. So it dived into the deep ocean floor once more, and soon the huge and terrifying shadow underneath the golden front ship disappeared. Zhang Yi spread his hands. It was fair enough. The utilization of his strength at sea would be limited. However, once the fin dragon came ashore, this creature would be nullified no matter how strong it was. Unless it had the ability to move among solid mediums like Knut's ability Blue Shark. Count yourself lucky, if I had come in a military ship this time, I would have gotten you killed. After all, the golden front was only a civilian ship, and its ability to attack and defend was too much inferior to that of a military ship. Otherwise, with Huashu Kingdom's current level of warships, using more powerful high-speed torpedoes, even this powerful monster would only be able to run away. The fin dragon was very cunning, finding the opportunity to come over and take a round. Once it realized that the situation was not good, it would flee at the first opportunity. It was also aware that the little man in the air could not go deep into the sea to fight it. Zhang Yi returned to the golden front, and this matter was considered over for the time being. However, he still reminded Old Tian and the other crew members once again that they must strengthen their guard. This kind of big sea monster was very vindictive and did not know when it would attack again. Old Tian said yes repeatedly. The kind of attack that he had just experienced seemed to have been lightly solved by Zhang Yi, but for the others on board, it was no less than experiencing a magnitude 10 earthquake. That kind of giant sea beast could easily destroy a huge ship of 10,000 tons and bury them in the sea. After the fin dragon escaped, Zhang Yi put the ship back on the sea. The storm was still going on and the wind and waves were strong, just that the ship was manageable after it was not affected by the vortex. However, moving forward was not possible for the time being. The ship's anchor had already been lowered, and it would not be able to depart until the storm had passed. With that, the golden front was still rocking, and Zhang Yi sat on a chair in the control room, in no hurry to leave. He still needed to guard against the fin dragon suddenly killing back. As for the golden front, many people on board were still unaware of what was happening due to the lack of sight. This was a great pity for some people. Because if they knew the power Zhang Yi possessed, they wouldn't have had some ridiculous thoughts. It was only after a day and a night had passed that the blizzard slowly stopped. A thick layer of snow had piled up on the golden front, the sea surface was scattered with ice and snow debris, and large pieces of floating ice floated in the sea water. Zhang Yi had been watching inside the control room for a day, and at this time, he was also a bit sleepy. He said to old Tian, arrange for someone to clean up a bit, then we can be on our way. I'll go back and rest for a while. I feel shallow, so if you encounter a fin dragon or any other problems, wake me up directly. Mr. Zhang. Old Tian said. Zhang yawned and went back to his room to rest. Old Tian immediately ordered and had a few people called up from the bottom cabin there to clean the snow on the ship. Soon, the Golden Front raised its anchor and continued sailing. Only then did the cook Lao Xia come to the kitchen and start preparing the meals. It was supposed to be lunch, but today the food was not put out until after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As usual, he pushed the food cart and brought the Rock Flow Group's food to the door of the cabin, then looked at the hatch and called out to people to come and eat. Cha Haicheng came out of his room, and his wife Kim Kimi came out of the room facing him, and Cha Haicheng gave her a look. Kim Kimi immediately understood and walked towards Chef Xia Changming with an enchanting stride. Chef Xia Changming had planned to leave after delivering the meal, but when he saw Kim Kimi's charming face, he changed his mind. Appa, spread the waves, hey yo. Kim Kimi came to Chef Xia Changming's front, and the other people who received the rice knew better and hurriedly left, looking at the two of them with ambiguous eyes as they left. Then they looked at Cha Haicheng with a playful face. Kim Kimi wrapped her arms around Chef Xia Changming's arm and said pitifully, Appa, I want to eat something good to make up for it recently. Can you help me out? Chef Xia Changming hemmed and hawed, not caring that there were still people watching here, and his hands directly moved about her body. Want to eat good food, was it? This is good, Appa will satisfy you today. He pulled Kim Kimi and hurried towards the restroom. The restroom was not monitored and he didn't want his co-workers to see him live. Chef Xia Changming's face was on fire. Kim Kimi was worthy of being a former ace member of a girl group and was very good at seducing men. Chef Xia Changming's entire attention was drawn away from her. He didn't even notice the bearded Rudolph at the door when he passed by Cha Haicheng and their cabin. As a first-class pickpocket, stealing a piece of communicator was simply not too easy for him. On top of that, he was able to perfectly utilize the visual dead space to avoid being detected by the surveillance. The duo just made a sideways turn, and if they went to look at it from inside the surveillance, they couldn't discover anything different about him. With a short brush, Rudolph had already stuffed the communication device on Chef Xia Changming into his pocket. Then he quickly turned around and entered the cabin. Cha Haicheng closed the door to the room, and then Rudolph delivered the communication device to Eisenman, who was already ready. It must be as soon as possible. Otherwise something will happen that we don't even know. Cha Haicheng reminded. Eisenman received the communication device and his expression immediately became incredibly focused. He didn't strike up a conversation with Cha Haicheng but opened the communication device. As he expected, a password was needed to unlock it, but this could not be difficult at all for a top engineer of the Ringo Group. The copy had already been edited long ago. It was personally handled by Cha Haicheng. This Silla official understood very well how to use the power of words. He described the matter in a very exaggerated manner, making sure to capture the heart of the head of the Columbus Ocean Fleet at once. Only then would the other party send troops over to take them away. Time passed by, and the person in charge of the windbreak cautiously lay down on the wall, paying attention to the movements in the vicinity. There in the restroom, Kim Kimi was also playing out her life's work, trying to stall Chef Xia Changming as much as possible. To the others on the ship, this day was just a very ordinary day during the voyage. But for them, it was incredibly tense and exciting, and they couldn't stop looking forward to every second, as well as being scared. They did not dare to imagine the cost of this failure. After all, the feeling that Zhang Yi gave them was not a good person to talk to. Eisenman was focused as he began to crack the communicator. The first step was not difficult for him. However, the next step was to find a way to contact the Columbia fleet. It was a good thing that in the year 2051, technology had long since reached a level where global communication was possible. Whether it was Huashu Kingdom's Nebula satellite system or Columbia's Starlink system, both could do this. After nearly half an hour of tossing and turning, Eisenman finally solved the problem of the signaling channel. Quick, send out the distress message. Although Eisenman was superficially shocked, he was actually tired and sweating profusely, close to being deflated. He hurriedly handed over the communicator to Cha Haicheng's hand, allowing him to complete the final step. Chapter 864, The Signal. Cha Haicheng received the communicator and couldn't help but gulp, his hands still trembling. But time waited for no one. He hurriedly entered the prepared text. The last step was to click send. Because he was too nervous, Cha Haicheng's finger was placed on the screen and shifted several times. In the end, it was Xia Yunfan who couldn't look away and helped him press the send button. Gulp! Several people gulped at the same time, the 10,000 boulders in their hearts finally dropping a little. But the good times didn't last long, and they realized that the screen started spinning in circles. Cha Haicheng panicked and hurriedly asked Eisenman, "Mr. Eisenman, what is going on?" Eisenman took a look and said helplessly, "This is at sea, and what we're using is just an ordinary personal-type communication device. Slow signal transmission was normal." Cha Haicheng nervously asked, "Will the transmission fail?" Eisenman was silent for a moment and shook his head. A few people relaxed, thinking that things were already foolproof. Eisenman didn't want to dampen their spirits, but it was something that couldn't be hidden. "I mean, I don't know." Cha Haicheng's few people were again in a state of chicken. Every second, they were scared to death. Well, in the end, that circle finally finished spinning in their wide-eyed gazes. The green check mark signaled that the message had been successfully sent out. Eisenman also let out a long breath. "Now we'll see if it's effective. If they believe what we say, then there's a chance they'll send a ship over to take us away." He looked out along the window. "As long as we don't enter Huashu Kingdom's internal waters, Columbia's fleet will surely be able to find us and take us back." As a citizen of Columbia, he was immensely confident of this. The others were too late to hear him sigh and lament. "Quickly erase all the information, don't leave any traces," Cha Haicheng said to him in a hurry. Eisenman picked up his cell phone and performed some erasing operations. And at this time, Kim Kimmy over in the restroom could barely hold on any longer. It wasn't that she wasn't trying, it was really because Lao Xie's ability did pull the crotch a bit. The Eisens cleared away the traces of the operation on the communicator and then transferred it to Rudolph. Rudolph came outside cautiously with the communicator in his pocket, and then coughed very hard twice. After getting his signal, Kim Kimmy was relieved. After 2 minutes, Chef Xia Changming walked out of the restroom with Kim Kimmy, who was wiping her mouth with a handkerchief, while wearing clothes. Rudolph pretended to be going to the restroom and hurried over with one hand covering his stomach. Then silently, he slipped the communicator back into Chef Xia Changming's body. Professional pickpockets, their proficiency in stealing was ridiculously strong. Chef Xia Changming's communicator was stuffed inside the pocket of his pants, and his pants were not slack, so he was usually able to feel it if the communicator was taken away. But Rudolph naturally had his methods to do so without anyone realizing it. Chef Xia Changming was satisfied with Kim Kimmy's service today, and left the center cabin satisfied. He was oblivious to everything that Cha Haicheng and the others had done today. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, had just finished his night of squatting and was huffing and puffing in his room. That message then passed through the satellite and quickly reached the Columbus Ocean Fleet on Rope Island. Scouting Department. The soldier who received the communications signal casually glanced at it as usual. Recently, the intelligence that could be received was becoming less and less. Seeing that it was this kind of intelligence sent by private individuals, they didn't even bother to look at it in the past. Because there was no need to guess, it was 100% a signal for help. But nowadays, the survivors are getting fewer and fewer, or perhaps it was because they had lost hope, so they stopped asking the Navy for help. Perhaps it was a coincidence that the soldier on duty today glanced at the content of the message. This glance made him realize something different. A stone with magical power that allows one to gain incomparable strength. Huashu Kingdom even sent a large number of soldiers out to sea specifically for this. This distress signal was very different. The kinds of things sent in the past were either pleas, angry curses under despair, or saying that they could give up all their wealth. And rarely did anyone make such a description of the inhuman. As a professional soldier, he thought the statement was funny, but he still thought it was different and read it again carefully. Out of professional sensitivity, even though he didn't know if what the other person said was true or not, he still reported this information to his superiors. As a soldier, of course he didn't know about the existence of something like the source of God. Well, at their higher-ups, the direct translation of this kind of thing's name was Divine Origin Substance or Human Completion Program Source Substance. After the news was passed on to the higher-ups, it quickly drew the attention of the Chief of Detection, Bant Harrison. Because as the Chief of the Intelligence Department, he certainly knew of the existence of this divine substance. And one of his main tasks was to search for intelligence about this substance. The magical Yellowstone, Huashu Kingdom sent a large number of soldiers to get it. It's suspicious, very suspicious. Suddenly, Harrison thought of something. About 3 months ago, there was once an icebreaker from Huashu Kingdom that sailed towards the southeastern part of the ocean. At first, they had thought it was strange for a while, but after judging that it was just a civilian icebreaker, so they hadn't paid any special attention to it. But when combined with this letter of request for help, it suddenly gave off an unusual feeling. Harrison did not dare to delay, and out of prudence he reported the matter to Commander Douglas of the Ocean Fleet at the first opportunity. The news passed from the scouting department had a very high priority, and soon this intelligence was delivered to Douglas's desk. After reading the intelligence, Douglas took 2 puffs of his pipe and immediately summoned Harrison to his office. "Harrison, what was the source of this intelligence?" Once the two met, Douglas opened the door and inquired. Harrison replied, "It came from the sea, and the message was sent from an ordinary private communicator." Douglas frowned slightly. This was not the first time he had encountered this situation. Because of the importance of the sacred origin substance, the Navy had once had an order to give a very high reward whenever this substance was discovered. So in order to obtain the reward, various departments would often send back various news about it. But after confirmation, most of it was useless information. People in some small places who hadn't seen an inhuman, or even found someone who had developed a mutation, would treat it as if it was the effect of that divine source substance. "All right, I get it, you can go out now." Douglas let Harrison go back in and then thought about it, casually handing this information to his assistant. "Give it to Commander Karen Connor of the USS Copernicus, whose ship is responsible for patrolling that area, and send him over to check it out." Chapter 865, The Columbia Navy. After the Finn Dragon was scared off by Zhang Yi, the Golden Front continued to head towards Tianhai City in Huashu Kingdom. During dinner the next morning, Zhang Yi saw Zhu Lark holding a child and coming over to Zhou Qir with a haggard face. At this moment, she was very much haggard compared to when she had just left the sea, like a frosted eggplant, with the arrogance and confidence on her face gone. Especially after the incident of the massacre in the bottom cabin, it could be said that it had completely disqualified her from arrogance. Nowadays, when she saw Zhang Yi, she was all scared. Curious as to what she had come over to do, Zhang Yi walked over towards the duo. When Zhu Lark saw Zhang Yi, her face changed and she said to Zhou Qir, "I'll go back first, you can give me an answer later." Then he rushed back to his room, deadening the door from the inside. Zhang Yi's eyes were playful, thinking that this woman must have been in trouble again. She wanted to seek his help but was too embarrassed to ask, thus she retreated and resorted to Zhou Qir. He walked next to Zhou Qir and asked with a smile, "What is she doing here?" Zhou Qir smiled. Her white catkin wrapped around Zhang Yi's arm and gently laughed. "What else can she do?" "Because of the child." In the beginning, she was still excited and wanted to learn from others to be a mom and take care of the child. But it wasn't long before she was going crazy from the baby. This is still 2 people taking care of it together. If it was just her alone, I'm afraid she would have collapsed long ago. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. She chose it herself, why should she care? "I've made a deal with you, don't interfere in her mess. Let her swallow the bitter fruit of her own choice." Zhou Qir smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, without your nod of permission, I won't promise her anything. Feeling Zhou Qir's soft and elastic body, Zhang Yi's heart fluttered as he moved to the side of her neck and whispered, "Do you still remember the bet the two of us made earlier? Now it was me who won." Zhou Qir's face immediately surfaced a layer of redness. The content of that bet was really a bit frightening to her, but there was also a hint of anticipation vaguely. That kind of one, she had never tried it before. "Willing to gamble, I will promise you just that." She glanced flirtatiously at Zhang Yi, then took the initiative to hold Zhang Yi's hand and walked into the bedroom. That afternoon, the Golden Front cut through the water above the calm icy sea and sailed along the return route at a fast speed. Old Tian sat in the control room, smoking a cigarette while chatting with the crew. The voyage was already halfway through, and on the way here they had cleared up a lot of trouble on the way, including pirates and the navies of certain small countries. So the return trip would be much less problematic. However, Zhang Yi told everyone to be vigilant. Because they didn't bring anything with them when they came, even if they encountered the navies of some big countries, they didn't need to worry. But on the return trip, there was very important information on the ship. Cannot afford to lose. However, people are always afraid of what will come. Just when old Tian and the crew were talking about yellow jokes to relieve their boredom, suddenly, the Golden Front's radio received a subdued warning. The meaning obtained after machine translation was, "Attention to the suspicious vessel ahead, we were the Columbia Navy and are about to board and inspect your ship. Please stop traveling immediately and cooperate with us. A word of warning, do not attempt to resist or flee. Otherwise we will directly attack." The sudden warning put all the crew on alert at once. Old Tian jumped up from his chair and ran over to the console. The other party repeated the passage. Old Tian's pupils shrank. "Columbia's Navy. This is bad." When sailing on the sea, the most feared thing was to encounter them. Old Tian himself had no idea and rushed to inform Zhang Yi. Hearing the news, Zhang Yi's expression was also becoming grave. The Columbia Navy that was in existence that he was not willing to come into contact with right now. Even now, Zhang Yi was already a top-notch inhuman. However, encountering those guys on the sea would still bring Zhang Yi great pressure. When he was on his way, Zhu Jing had specially reminded Zhang Yi. The most important thing to pay attention to was Columbia's Columbus Ocean Fleet. This was because this fleet was the trump card of Columbia's navy. It even possessed the strength to compete with Huashu Kingdom's strongest navy, the East Sea region. Among the 6 regions of Huashu Kingdom, the East Sea region was probably second only to the Xinjiang region in terms of force. From this, it could be seen how strong the Columbus Ocean Fleet was. Not only did they possess a variety of world-class ships, they also possessed many powerful Inhumans. The last thing Zhang Yi wanted to encounter was them. "What's the situation? Did they say why they came over?" Zhang Yi changed his clothes while speaking extremely fast to communicate with old Tian. The appearance of the Columbia Navy was particularly abnormal. They were not intercepted on their way here, so why would they be intercepted on their return trip? The Golden Front was nominally just a civilian ship. An easy interception and inspection could easily cause unnecessary strife with Huashu Kingdom. The bigger the power was between them, the more cautious they should be instead. Zhang Yi was even a bit skeptical. Was it possible that they had already gotten some news? Old Tian replied, "They just said that we were a suspicious vessel and that we should be routinely inspected." Routine inspection? Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. This was still located in the high seas area. Where would there be any routine inspection? How far is the other party from us? According to the radar, there are still more than 20 nautical miles. Don't make any movements, first stop forward as they said. Zhang Yi changed his clothes and began to secretly calculate in his mind. Seeing Zhang Yi's serious look, Zhou Qir could not help but ask what had happened. "We've encountered Columbia's navy, there might be more trouble now." "They?" Zhou Qir was also a little nervous. What were they rushing towards? Regarding the source of God, Zhang Yi did not tell Zhou Qir. So until now, Zhang Yi didn't know what Zhang Yi's trip was really about. She was still guessing if it was simply to rescue someone with a noble status. Zhang Yi changed into his combat uniform and then gave her a kiss on the cheek. He gave Zhou Qi a reassuring smile. Don't think much about anything, there won't be any danger. Even if there was really a fight, the big deal was that he would abandon the ship and escape with Zhou Qi. Only then, he would have to give up a dozen or so crew members. This was the only thing he would regret. As for Zhu Lark and the others on the ship, Zhang Yi could only say that there was nothing he could do to help. Although space shuttling could quickly cross the boundary of 1,000 meters. However, after each use, there would still be a stagnation in the middle instead of a continuous movement. Thus, he could only take one person along at most. As an inhuman of the trait system, he was only equivalent to a trained soldier in terms of physical ability.